Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Inverted Podcast, where we talk about products, services, companies, concepts in the area of security, abuse, infra quality, everywhere where success is when nothing happens. And with me today, as always, my friends Dario and Dana. Welcome. And we have a
Absolutely.
special guest today, Mike. And Mike, why don't you start by introducing yourself before we go into the subject?
Hey. So I'm Mike Sager. I'm the head of security at a startup called New Harbor, where we do SaaS security for small and mid-sized organizations. For about 6 years, I was the chief technology officer and chief security officer at a U.S. political organization called Emily's List, where I was overseeing all things tech infrastructure data and really had a heavy focus on security because when I came in, it was shortly after the Russian attacks on the Democratic National Committee, which was another place that I had worked. And throughout my career, I've sort of been working in the political and technology space, and I've always had a heavy eye on security and really trying to focus on that. So helping a lot of individuals who are low technical, high risk, and low time availability. So
Yeah,
I think brings
high
us to
risk
today.
individuals. Yeah, high risk individuals. That's the subject of today. Those people, or maybe even resources that are under extreme pressure, under extreme threats, and how do we build products for those differently? And maybe we can start by thinking about what are these high risk individuals and what are these targeted attacks? What sets them apart from the script kiddie that gets a $10 phishing kit from the dark web and just sends it to as many people he can? What sets it apart, Mike?
So I the it's you end up having these groups of individuals who they're either prominent because they're running for office or they're activists within a space, and they are working on things that are they're individuals who don't have the protection of government necessarily. They are at advocacy orgs, they're at campaigns, they're at these different kinds of organizations that tend to be substantially under resourced. Security is not a central focus. Larger, more mature organizations like a party committee or political organization or a nonprofit that exists year over year understands that they need to consider these things. But even then, in a lot of these cases, it can be individuals who are consultants to these groups, or they can be the head of these organizations, and they can be small organizations. And because of the work that they do, they are interesting to an advanced threat actor.
Mm,
But they don't have the resources to defend against that kind of work that the same way that, a government entity like State Department or a foreign ministry or whatever, like any of those kinds of places that is going to engage in that, in international work. And it doesn't even have to be international. Like the US politics very clearly affect the globe. And so there is a great interest from other states in what happens here, and there are state entities, the Russians, the Chinese, the whomever, who want to affect that, and they have their own aims. And so, as we saw in the 2016 election cycle, and there have been other incidents in the past, that they foreign governments are will not hesitate to involve themselves in U.S. affairs, and the folks on this side, it's you don't have a ton of resources. I always say to folks, no one ever runs for office because they want to run for the most secure campaign ever. They want to run for office because they want to do good in the world, and so the you end up with a situation where you have folks with extraordinarily limited resources who are facing the most advanced attacks. So,
mm.
with
So
some
limited resources, advanced attacks. That's the people. Dario, the organizations, are they also different when we talk about the customer side?
Well, yeah, they can be very different. I mean, sometimes it's individuals within large organizations. I mean, it can be researchers or CEOs or outspoken people, but often it's people within relatively hand-wavy organizations. I mean, political campaign teams are a really good example. I remember somebody once told me that a political campaign team has two stages. The first stage is raise money. The second stage is spend that money that you raised. There's no stage establish organizational hygiene or organizational maturity. That stage does not exist because in any case after election day your organization is not going to exist anymore.
Mm.
So I think it really tends to be these more grassroots hand wavy organizations. Also, we see that with a lot of human rights defending organizations or activism organizations. They have a focus. They want to, as Mike said, they want to do good in the world. They don't want to build up a safe castle that prevents all types of attacks. They want to perform something, and also just like any organization, they have to move fast in order to do that. So they might also have to take shortcuts. So those
Mm.
organizations, that's usually where we see people. We also see people in journalism organizations like newspapers that are often being targeted for who they are, or sometimes victims of doxing attacks, who for whatever reason, an opinion they have stated, or I don't know,
What's a
bragging.
doxing attack for people who don't know that?
Yeah, a doxing attack is if you're participating in a more initially anonymous way in an online forum, for example, and then people publish your personal information. Like that's something that we see a lot um, with content creators, especially on the adult content side, that
Mm.
their personal information are getting doxed, and then their house um, is getting raided, or like is going to be visited by creepy stalkers who think that they're in love with the content creator or musicians or other social media people. So it's really the act of exposing personal information about people who don't want their personal information, like their address and their real names, being exposed.
Dana?
Uh, we talked about kind of political targets and nation states. I just wanted to point out for our listeners that there's also correlation to like high value targets, like people who own a lot of crypto assets or high value infrastructure, which is like you can think of it as like application infrastructure that a lot of companies use that if it's targeted has a mass impact. Similar adversaries, you have nation states that have lots of resources and also have lots of time, which is something that um, a lot of the things that you mentioned script kiddies don't have. Or you have organized criminals that have lots of resources and financial backing and something that target these types of people or infrastructure as well. Um, so there's a lot of surface area of people that need protection. There's a lot of, you could have a CEO worth a lot of money at a high value company that's really small and they just don't have the resources to take care of it or the sophistication or resistance from the user to add some protections, which I'm sure Mike's run into a lot
Oh
of
yeah.
times. So
Oh yeah. Well, and one of the things with like when you in all of these cases, you have all of this like advanced stuff that you need to think about, and people who will like take the time to research their targets and craft like specific lures and do really put in the legwork. But you still got to worry about all the regular. Do you guys care if I swear? I tend to swear when
No
I'm
swearing.
what?
we're
No
No swearing.
we're
swearing.
No swearing.
we're not
Um,
child
uh,
content.
Got it. Okay. So you still got to worry about all the regular stuff on the internet, like the drive-by stuff, the gift card scams, all of those kinds of things that are still out there that are not targeting an organization because of what they're doing. They're just targeting an organization because they have money, and whether it's a little money or a lot of money, it doesn't matter. They're targeting it because they want your money. So you've got to balance both. But the thing that I always do tell folks is a lot of the work that you do for one presents benefits for the other.
I was going to
And
ask you,
so
because if you do a fully targeted user protection, let's say you have a campaign leader and you protect them to the max, those other, opportunistic attacks don't really come through anymore, right? Because they're blocked also.
for the most part, one of the things that I think we're seeing more and more of now is stuff that doesn't depend as much on like direct technology, and it gets a little bit more into the like wire transfer fraud kind of stuff, and or just it's social engineering kind of stuff. And I still, and it's hard to say because like you've got so many different kinds of things, but like New Harbor, we support some like foundations and things like that, and they, we see stuff like fairly commodity phishing, but it's coming through a DocuSign. And the threat actor is using tools that they're using regular tools to bypass some of the other controls that we put in place to stop this kind of stuff. And so, the DocuSign link itself comes through, but maybe it's, it has something pointing to a different lore in there. And then all of a sudden, there's a little link in there and it's clicking through and you find yourself on some other system. And so like there's a lot of pieces like that. Obviously the pig butchering stuff is generally happening. And that is the kind of organized crime piece that where they're building up that rapport. But I've seen versions of that. When I was at Emily's List, I intercepted a phishing campaign that was targeting our organization's president that presented itself as coming from a university. But it was on a .com. It wasn't on an edu, but it had the name of the university in the email. And at this point, I had already done enough initial work around it with my team but this fairly early on, where I got it forwarded from the president's assistant. She was like, "Hey, I saw this in the inbox. This struck me as a little weird. Can you take a look at this?" And sure enough, I was like, I don't think this is real. I ended up calling the university's IT department. I said, "Hey, is this your domain yours?" And they said, "That's not ours." I said, "Thanks." And so, we blocked the domain. We moved on with our day. No harm, no foul. But like, that was the kind, that was a well-constructed lore. It did not have any link. It was a request for a meeting. Like who that threat actor was, no idea. It could have been domestic, could have been foreign, could have been any number of things, but we stopped it. And like something as innocuous as a meeting request from a seemingly official organization can end up being something that is potentially harmful to an organization's security.
And so you talked about like this is very targeted, right? Like they took the effort to research the target. They found out they might be interested in a university. They found the domain name was free. They took the domain name. They did all of this. They spent maybe a few $100s just to construct this attack, right? So what types of groups do we think are normally behind them, and how are these attacks different from the sort of Dana? Like how are these attacks different from the opportunistic ones?
So they're I mentioned it before, but I think they have the resources and they have the time to put in because the targets are of high value, and a lot of times it goes back to cost. Like you can absorb as a bad actor the cost that it takes, either time, resources, money, because the target value is so high. So you could spend years building these targeted attacks because the payoff is huge when you get the actual compromise, right? And that's different than most of us face in like drive-bys, or we happen on something, or even if we're targeted, we're one target of like thousands of a bad actor, right? These targets that we're talking about in this instance are very high value. Value could be money, value could be like the information valuable, value high value could be like impersonation could be valuable. And so there's a lot of resources that the bad actors throw in to try to compromise these things, including like you have air gap computers and they can figure out and spend millions of dollars because they're nation states on how to get into an air gap system, right? Because they have those resources, they have that time, right?
For our audience, what's an air gap system? And then we'll go to Dario.
Air gap systems are computers or infrastructure that run various software or do various functionality that's separated from the external internet. They're kind of by themselves in their own
Like
system,
a
and
nuclear
by
reactor
being air
control
gapped,
system.
nobody should have access to it except for people that can get into the air gap officially, right?
So
It's very extreme. Governments use it, but also bad actors target it. So
like a nuclear control system or like something like that that is really air gapped.
Yeah, or like a
sad
water.
joke, but probably the nuclear control systems are not protected by air gap, and it would
Okay.
be more
Well,
like
they're probably protected by old infrastructure. I think it's floppy. I think 5 1/4
more
floppy
like
disks are still in use.
like the armed forces or intelligence communities use that type of system. Really high value targets, high valued systems, and people within governments use air gap systems. There's air gap clouds, for
Mhm.
instance, that
You see
Okay,
that sometimes
Dario?
also in local infrastructure, like in water supply, municipality infrastructure, that the system that defines how much um, how the water is being purified is not connected to the internet. So you just use a USB
Oh
stick
boy.
to load new software to it, which yeah, again, like brings other risks.
yeah, and to
The
that
thought,
point, physical you need physical access in a lot of
yeah.
you have to like be there to use those systems, right? uh,
Another approach that I always think about that these targeted versus non-targeted ones is like the most attacks, these non-targeted attacks, that they try a certain audience, and if they don't work, they move horizontally to other people. Like if they can't get
yeah.
males between X and Y that like this topic to get them phished, they go to another audience and try to get them phished. But with target attacks, you work like vertically. Like if you can't get your target with a cheap and scalable way to get them compromised, you take the more expensive one. They're not always just, or they're rarely starting with the 0-day exploit that hasn't been seen in the wild yet. They usually start with something cheaper, and then they go up vertically as until it succeeds. And if they have to take out the 0-day, then there is a chain of command in these organizations that approves that use. So it's really more of a how do you move when you fail in your mission is one of the core differences.
You also have you know the attackers, even the simple ones, have access to sophisticated infrastructure and marketplaces, and it's kind of a sad thing, but you could have a script kiddie that someone non-sophisticated do a drive-by just and happen to get into a machine. They dump all the cookies, realize they have a high value target, and then sell that because there's marketplaces, and sell that access to someone with more sophisticated technology to go in and exploit it like a nation state. So the people or targets that Mike's talking about really like run the gamut of having to be protected by like um and once it could be a simple attack that there was something opened up and it just happened to be there, and the person who found it not very sophisticated, but they get it to the people that can exploit it too. So
Yeah, so not only direct attack, only also chain attacks and going from one person to another, going from one system to another, selling on the marketplace. Um, Mike, you wanted to say something, I think?
Yeah, one of the things that to understand about some of these groups is that whether you're within the world of high value targets, and whether that is going to be someone running for office, whether that is if you've got an advocacy group that advocates on behalf of like Ukraine or something like that, or you've got film actors or musicians or whatever, you have a wide variety of a technical landscape that they're working with. And for some, and it can be, there can be like 2-person consulting firms that have all the information about these folks who I'm not trying to expand a target pool here, but like you can have these small, really small shops where they provide really important services to these people, personal assistants, or schedulers, or communications firms and things like that, where they're all using personal laptops. They are not named people, but they are a path in to it. And so as you're thinking about protecting these high value protectees, you have to think about, how do you protect these ancillary groups? How do you write requirements into contracts? How do you make sure that that you're not just considering the organization itself, but you're considering those that are supporting the organization too?
So
I think like AI and data leakage like makes it extremely hard now. Like
Yeah.
now it's much easier to build these targeted attacks because like there's been these attacks that have extracted data that like disappears. Like all these medical records, someone took it, but they never show up. Like what are they used for? Or like people you know are like, hey, I filled out a survey to get this, but their data they're like it's innocuous. Well, the bad actors like throw AI on top of that data to say like I'm targeting this person, what is everything I know about this, who they know, what they're doing, so then I can go in and like impersonate the like and make a very targeted attack that should be successful. And the AI just makes it stupidly simple to do that. Like it'll say like pretend you're the real estate agent because you know we know they send emails and like um it's infinitely harder and people don't think about all this ancillary stuff like you were mentioning about two-person company that controls or has access to all these other people that information could be leveraged to get into these high value targets. And so it things are escalating and I don't think everybody realizes that's happening with the way the industry is going now.
yeah, this is
Yeah.
interesting. I saw a video a few 2 years ago or something of someone who, a CNN journalist or some other journalist that signed a waiver and allowed a social hacker to go after him.
That was Rachel.
And,
Yeah.
and yeah, Rachel, what's the last name? Do you know?
Rachel Toback, she has social proof security.
Yeah, and
So
so what she did was she basically first saw a picture of furniture, and then she called the furniture shop and say, "Hey, can you tell me what the address was I shipped the last stuff to? Because I want to do something else. I want to make sure it goes to the right house." They gave her the address, so now she had the person's address. Then they changed like flight seats and all this stuff, and it took them days and a voice changer and all these kind of things. But with AI, this is an afternoon, right?
Right,
Like,
just
and that's what you're saying, and then I can do this at scale. And
right.
so we might see sort of crossover from targeted attacks that are low volume to targeted attacks that are medium volume or medium targeted. First it was like high volume, simple, low volume, targeted. We're going to see the middle fill out, I think.
Right.
Yeah, and I think that's what we're already seeing. I mean, things that were sophisticated a few years ago, like I don't know, phishing two factors, like real-time phishing of multiple authentication factors. That was like, I remember like when I was dealing more with the DC crowd, showing people that you can now phish a text message code in real time. That was like just like mind blowing to them. And now this is common knowledge. It's table stakes of probably also script kiddies.
well, it's common knowledge with us, and it's common knowledge with the threat actors, but it hasn't permeated the actual targeted individuals yet.
Yeah.
And like when I do security awareness training, especially for folks who are highly targeted, I mean, I am the biggest evangelist for hardware FIDO keys for folks in this space. There's a number of other folks who are as well. I'll talk more about that in a moment. But like one of the things I was always doing, this was something I would do even back in 2017, 2018 when I was started, is because that's how long this stuff it's been around longer. There's a phishing kit called Modlishka that I would go and just show the video proof of it, where it would steal TOTP time-based one-time password tokens. So whether it was an authenticator code, whether it was an SMS code, it would steal it in real time and automatically generate a session cookie for that user's device, or for that user's account. And so, it was basically a reverse proxy, and the user would have no idea unless they really looked at the URL that they were even on a phishing site, because everything worked. And so every time I'd show people this, it was a great, that was one of my two tricks to get people to take me seriously. The other one was to look them up on Dashed and then ask them if they were still using a specific password or not. And that usually got people's attention as well. But like even recently, I had a legislator reach out because they had received what was, I quickly determined, commodity email. It was a scareware email in their spam box in their workspace. That was one of those, we recorded you on your computer. Here's a pass, your password and all of that kind of stuff. And of course, when you are on the other side of this, on the defender side, and you see 1,000 of these in a day, it doesn't bother you. But if you receive this and you don't know that this is a thing, it's really scary. And so, I was just like, hey, you've got nothing to worry about. It was an old breach. Nothing you need to be concerned about. You haven't been hacked. You're fine. Just ignore it. And easy peasy. But up until that point, this legislator was very alarmed by this. So.
Yeah, using this stuff to create, you don't even need to know what you don't even need to know the password. You just need to make people think and panic, and that's another common attack, right? And if you are targeted attack, you have more ways to make them panic, and so there's lots of things coming. But we are all product builders and managers, and I want to start with you, Dario, because you've built Google's answer for target users, the Advanced Protection Program. But I would love for you to tell me if you're building a product, doesn't matter what. And you think about, I want to protect targeted attackers from this. Could be like a productivity software like Miro or whatever, Zoho or whatever, or it could be something else. Like what should we put in there to protect targeted users? Dario, why don't we start with you?
I think when we built that advanced protection program at Google, and later I did the similar thing at Facebook, it's about setting a higher baseline. Like if you feel like there is or know. Either you know or you feel or you think there could be highly targeted people on your platform, give them an option to raise the security baseline with as simple approach as possible. Like let them raise from the masses, where maybe your basic security measures are good enough, but for some people you need a raised security baseline. That's one step. Like, give them a channel.
But you let people self-select. You don't do it for them. You let them opt in. Well, it's an opt-in thing.
I think it could go both two ways. One is could be a self-selection. You self-identify. You have to give people a way to self-identify and say, I think I'm at higher risk. You can still do the whole, I have signals that show that you might be at higher risk. It could be customers that are paying more, that are spending more, that are known. But I think both channels have to be there. Give people a way to identify and build a way to identify that for them, to put them in a higher security baseline. And then the second part is be opinionated. Tell them that's the things that a higher security baseline, why that is important to them, and evolve over time, because that higher security baseline at some point stops being strong enough for those targeted people. So instead of just selling them functionality, sell them the baseline or offer them the baseline, and you take on responsibility. Exactly, on that higher baseline, and take on responsibility and be opinionated on keeping that baseline at least significantly more secure than the baseline.
So it's like offer them a new line, allow them to choose. Mike?
Yeah, and what part of this is that in most of these cases, the folks who are highly targeted are going to trust their team to tell them where they need to be, and it's going to be just tell me what to do. Now, that isn't 100% of the time. Sometimes people will push back on it. You also have situations where people will read things on the internet and think that something is important that is either not important or counterproductive. I can't tell you the number of times I be, well, I use a VPN. I'm like, well, do you use a security key? Because and they're like, well, no. I'm like, okay, I don't care about you, and I don't use public Wi-Fi. You can use public Wi-Fi. It's fine. Just use it. You need to use a security key. That's the problem. When you're talking about it at the organizational level, there, both Google when the team rolled out APP, shortly thereafter they sent around a PDF to some of us that listed all the workspace settings, because a bunch of us like, our first reaction was, this is great. Now, how do we do this for the workspace accounts too? Because I believe Dario, correct me if I'm wrong, I think when APP first rolled out, it was only on the consumer product. And then, but it was very quick that we were like, we need this on, and we got those of us in the space, we were constantly giving feedback. Microsoft recently rolled out something called baseline security mode on 365 that I've started rolling out for some of our clients that are on there. But even then, like, Microsoft still gates a fair number of the identity stuff on higher pricing levels, and that becomes that's a challenge. Google doesn't do that. Like Google, I can enforce FIDO2 only, and also importantly, I can enforce it granularly based upon the organization. I can't do that at Microsoft, and that ends up, for organizations where every dollar that's not spent on voter contact, but is spent on something else, that's the calculus that so many of these folks are making. How what do I spend on this versus what do I spend on that? There's a finite pool of money. There's a finite pool of time. And when the campaign manager, when the campaign chair, or whatever, or the organization's head is doing their risk analysis, how, to them, it's either I'm so small that Russia's never going to hear of me, which is, as we know, not true. And then the other avenue is, well, I can't do anything to stop a foreign military anyway, so why bother? And so I'm not going to spend on that. And that's also not true. You can use the tools that are available to get there, but we have to lower that barrier for folks. And and as Dario said, we have to be opinionated, and we have to make this stuff accessible. And so, the same way that there's that SSO tax, and we have to get security out of enterprise plans, and we have to make security something that is available for everyone.
We actually had
We
actually had a discussion on this, is like, how do you figure out when to charge for security features if you're a product PM? Along those lines, it seems like not only is having the ability to secure and granular, but that feeds into the user experience, and you really need to concentrate on the user experience, because you mentioned like the users aren't as sophisticated, and I'm sure you had people come to you say, Mike, I can't use this. I don't it's popping up these dialogues. I don't know what it is, or it's blocking me from talking to my friend who I really need to, because I got to go pick up my whatever. Right. And so you need to really concentrate on user experience for these if you want the adoption, and you don't want people to turn off those advanced features.
So I had a CEO of a startup that I was at who did not want to use anything, and they just did not want a single thing to affect their life. It got to the point where it was impossible for me to defend them, and it just, there has to be a little bit of give and take in this stuff, but and you can work with your protectees for them to understand that they do have to change the way they do stuff. And if someone is unwilling to do anything different, then there's only so much you can do for them. You can turn on as many technical behind the scene controls as you can, but you sometimes you're going to have to change your workflow a little bit. But if it gets to the point where it means that they can't do something that they need to do, or they perceive that they can't do, even if it's not true, then you have a problem. And that's the balance that it's very hard. I don't profess to have the answers for this, but it's very, very difficult. So
we've talked about building the products for targeted users. We talked about how the targeted attacks are different, and etc. But let's say that someone's listening to this podcast and they're thinking, hey, I'm a targeted user, or I know someone who is. What is the one advice that you would give them to do? Let's start with you, Mike.
YubiKeys.
YubiKey, for people who don't know it, that's a little USB key. You can order them online. You set them up on your account. There you go. Mike is holding it in front of the camera.
I think I have a Google
10 seconds
one here
if you
too.
want to see what it looks like. Rewind 10 seconds. These, you put them on your account. And whenever you log in, you have to touch them, and then the key will check if you're logging into the right item. It can be your Facebook, it can be your LinkedIn, it can be your Microsoft, Google, whatever. And the different apps don't know from each other that this key is used. It's really personal. And that makes it really hard for you to be hacked with all of these phishing things. So, Mike, YubiKey, Dario, what's your advice?
Well, if you really think that you're being targeted by very sophisticated actors because you're a human rights defender or because you're a politician, look for organizations in your space that can help you with it, can give you advice. And like, yeah, organizations like Emily's List, Access Now, even Amnesty International has some cybersecurity programs. So try to find people who can help you, institutions who can help you. Maybe try to read fewer blogs about people who try to scare you. But there are people out there whose job it is to help you and to make you feel safer.
All right, so YubiKey, find help. Dana?
I think you need to, have a mindset of to be more aware, be skeptical of things. Like there's usually not a lot of free stuff in this world, and or verify, if you receive something, verify it did come from who you think it should have been, and just raise your awareness. And if you're in security, talk to your users about raising their awareness of things.
Yeah. YubiKey, get help, raise awareness, and I would say just stay in your lane, right? If something is looks too good to be true, if the app is normally paid, now you get it for free. If it looks too good to be true, it probably is. And when you do it, it probably brings some badness with it. So install only from the App Store or the Play Store or the Microsoft Store, whatever. Stay in the normal stuff and don't do exotic stuff. And use that heightened awareness to make sure you don't get malware on your laptop or your mobile phone that could do some damage, because that's also where we see attacks. Mike, thank you for joining this conversation about targeted attacks to high value people and organizations. And thank you all for listening. Thanks, Dana and Dario, as always. And thank you to our listeners, viewers. It's been another amazing episode of the Inverted Podcast. And remember, we build things to keep people safe. Saving one is always worth it, especially if they're targeted. Have a great one. Bye bye.